The rifle bolt slides home with a sound like a quiet verdict. In Millie's Diner on the corner of Route 12 and Clearwater Road in Harlow, Montana, population 1,847, elevation 3,200 feet, 17 miles from the nearest cell tower, 6 people stand in a row near the entrance, and not one of them is holding their weapon above the waist. They don't need to. The weapons are visible. That's enough. 26 members of the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club are seated in the diner's booths and bar stools and against the back wall, and every single one of them has gone completely, catastrophically still. Some hold forks in midair. One is still chewing. He stops. At the center of the room, a young woman in a blue and white waitress apron stands beside the counter. She has a coffee pot in her right hand, still warm, still full, as if she'd been about to top off someone's cup when the door opened. Her left hand rests loosely at her side. Her expression has not changed. The tallest of the 6 newcomers, dark-haired, jaw like carved stone, eyes that have seen things that don't exist in any unclassified report, looks directly at the woman in the apron. The room is so silent that when he speaks, it reaches every corner without effort. "Major," he says, "we're here." The woman sets the coffee pot down on the counter. Carefully, without hurry. "I know," she says. Bobby Bull Garza, seated in the largest booth, stares at the young woman he spent the last several hours humiliating, and for the first time in a long time, Bobby Garza is afraid. Rewind 6 hours. Maya Chin arrived at Millie's Diner every morning at 5:47 a.m. Not 5:45, not 5:50. Dave Walsh, who'd owned the diner for 23 years and prided himself on recognizing patterns in people the way a rancher reads weather, had noticed this within her first week and mentioned it to his daughter Tina over dinner. "That new girl," he'd said. "She's got a clock in her head." Tina had laughed. Maya had been standing outside in the pre-dawn dark of a Montana October, watching the parking lot with the specific quality of attention that most people never develop and could not be taught in any civilian context. She wasn't watching for anything in particular. She was watching for everything in general. There was a difference. The diner had 7 exit points if you counted the kitchen loading door and the window above the second bathroom stall. The nearest law enforcement was Deputy Hank Morrow, stationed 12 minutes north, or 8, if he hit the lights. The regulars arrived in a predictable rotation. Ranchers at 6 a.m. sharp, highway workers at 6:30, retirees from 7 onward. The exception was Bud Carlisle, who drove a black pickup and always took the corner booth and always ordered black coffee and always watched Maya in a way that made Tina uncomfortable. Maya had clocked Bud Carlisle as a low-level Iron Serpents associate on her 3rd day. He wasn't dangerous on his own. He was a camera, someone whose job was to notice things and report them. She'd spent 3 months being exactly boring enough to be invisible to him. The diner itself was exactly what the name suggested: small, warm, yellow-lit in a way that felt like the 1970s had refused to leave. The booths had red vinyl seats patched with duct tape in 2 places. The coffee was genuinely excellent, because Dave Walsh took coffee personally. The pie was made by Dave's sister Connie in a house 2 miles north, and it arrived every Tuesday and Friday morning in a white cardboard box that smelled like cinnamon and brown sugar and something Maya couldn't name but associated, without wanting to, with a childhood kitchen she no longer visited. She tied her apron behind her back with the same economical precision she used for everything. "Morning," said Tina from behind the counter, where she was already restocking sugar caddies with the slightly manic energy of someone who had woken up too early and compensated with too much caffeine. She was 18 years old, gap-toothed, perpetually cheerful, and possessed of a warmth so uncomplicated it sometimes made Maya feel like a very old building standing next to a garden. "You're going to freeze out there one of these mornings, you know. November in Montana is not a joke." "I'm aware," said Maya. "Dad says it might snow Thursday. It'll snow Wednesday. Pressure dropped last night." Tina stared at her. "You looked at a weather app." "I looked at the sky." Tina went back to the sugar caddies, shaking her head with the particular affection of someone who has given up trying to understand a person and decided to simply enjoy them. Maya went to her locker in the back, the one she'd asked Dave to reinforce with a second lock, claiming valuables, which was technically true, and checked the encrypted phone inside. One message from Special Agent Marcus Webb. "Up timeline holding. 72 hours. Do not surface. Close." 72 hours. She locked the phone away and returned to the floor. 3 months. 91 days of coffee refills and pie slices, and yes, sir, here's your check. Have a wonderful day. 91 days of filing nails down, of rounding edges, of performing the specific kind of invisibility that small-town life demands of a young woman who doesn't want to be noticed. The DOJ had given her a background legend so airtight it could survive a federal audit. Maya Chun, born in Missoula, raised in Billings, waitressed in Spokane, moved back to Montana after a breakup. Quiet, mild, forgettable. It was the performance of her career, and she had never once enjoyed it. But 72 hours. She knew what that meant. The warrants were drawn. The surveillance package was complete. 3 months of financial transactions, communications intercepts, physical surveillance, and Maya's own first-hand observations of the Iron Serpent's operations in and around Harlow. The dead drops, the coded supply runs, the faces she'd memorized through a diner window, were being assembled into a federal prosecution that Webb had called, in their last secure call, airtight enough to make an attorney general cry happy tears. 72 hours. She could be invisible for 72 more hours standing on her head. She picked up the coffee pot and started her rounds. They heard the motorcycles before they saw them. It was 11:15 a.m., and the diner held its usual Thursday mid-morning crowd. For ranchers finishing late breakfasts, 2 highway workers on lunch break, an elderly couple from up near the Blackfoot River who ordered the same thing every week and called each other Mama and Daddy in a way that Maya found, privately, unbearable in its sweetness. Tina was humming something to herself behind the pie display. Dave was in the kitchen running calculations on his food order. The sound started as a rumble on the edge of perception, the kind you feel in your back teeth before you consciously register it as sound. Then it grew, and by the time the lead rider turned off Route 12 into the gravel lot, it was the only sound in Harlow, Montana. The windows shook slightly. The coffee in Maya's pot trembled in a way that reminded her of a different kind of vibration in a different kind of country a long time ago. She counted them as they parked. 26 riders. She recognized the Iron Serpent's colors, a black diamondback coiling around a chrome gear, patches that named chapters from 4 states. She recognized the configuration. Command up front, enforcers flanking, prospects in the rear. She recognized Bobby Bull Garza the moment he swung off his bike. She had been studying Bobby Garza for 3 months. He was a large man, 6'3", somewhere north of 260 pounds, with a beard gone gray at the edges and a face that looked like it had been through a significant amount of weather and decided it didn't mind. He moved with the slow deliberateness of a man who had spent decades never needing to hurry, because things happened when he wanted them to happen and stopped when he wanted them to stop. He wore full Iron Serpent's colors, a Glock 19 in an unconcealed hip holster. Montana's open carry laws made this legal and, in Bull's case, intentional, and a ring on his right hand that looked like it had been used as a weapon at some point. In 3 months, Maya had documented 2 confirmed drug distribution networks operating out of Harlow, 1 arms transfer to a cartel intermediary in Missoula, communications linking Bull to a human trafficking pipeline running from the Mexican border through Colorado and into Canada, 3 unsolved assaults in towns along the Iron Serpent's territory, and 1 murder case that had gone cold in 2019 because the only witness had subsequently relocated with a degree of urgency that suggested encouragement. Bobby Garza was one of the most dangerous criminals operating in the northwestern United States. He walked through the door of Millie's Diner like he owned it. Behind him came 25 men who spread through the room with the practiced ease of people who had done this before, occupied a space, displaced it, made it theirs through sheer mass, and the implicit understanding that asking them to leave was an option available only in theory. The ranchers at the back booth went quiet. The elderly couple, Daddy's hand moved to cover Mama's on the table, a gesture so instinctive he probably didn't know he'd done it. The highway workers studied their coffee. Tina appeared at Maya's shoulder, very close, voice low. "Should I call?" "No," Maya said, equally low, equally calm. "Smile? Take their orders. It's fine." "Maya, Tina." She turned and looked at the girl directly. "Go take their orders. It's fine." There was something in Maya's voice, not reassurance exactly, more like certainty, and somehow that was more calming than comfort would have been. Tina swallowed, straightened her apron, and walked forward. Bull Garza watched the two waitresses and smiled. Maya moved to his table first, because she understood one of the foundational principles of managing dangerous men in enclosed spaces. Give them the attention they're seeking before they demand it. Remove the variable. What can I get you? She said, pen poised over her pad. Bull looked at her for a long moment. Not at her face. At her, the way certain men do when they are deciding what category to file you in. Maya kept her expression open and professional and completely empty of the 17 things she was simultaneously cataloging about him. Coffee, he said. Black. And something to eat. What's good? Brisket sandwich is the special today. Dave makes it himself. Dave? Bull glanced toward the kitchen. That the owner? Yes, sir. He smiled again. It was a smile that knew things about rooms. Bring me the brisket. She wrote it down and moved on. Around her, the diner reconfigured itself. Iron serpents filling every booth, her other customers compressing into smaller spaces, or, in the case of the highway workers, quietly leaving cash on the counter and exiting without collecting their change. Maya moved through the space with the unhurried efficiency she brought to everything, taking orders, delivering coffee, keeping her voice even and her eyes forward. She was counting the weapons. 14 visible firearms, 9 probable concealed. The two men nearest the kitchen door were carrying something under their vests. The hang of the fabric said long barrel, which in this context meant sawed-off shotgun. Deke Garza, Bull's nephew, 26 years old, Iron Serpent's sergeant-at-arms, the one with the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, had positioned himself between Maya and the exit with the casualness of someone who didn't want her to know that's what he was doing. She knew. She refilled Bull's coffee. She smiled at the man next to him who asked for pie. She noted that Bud Carlisle had come in at 11:30, 12 minutes after the Iron Serpents arrived, and had taken his corner booth with something in his posture that looked almost eager. He was filming on his phone, she noticed, not the Iron Serpents. Her. She noted this. She moved on. 71 hours and 53 minutes. The diner filled with the sound of men eating and talking and laughing loudly in the way that large groups of men do when they want a room to understand they are at home in it. Maya moved through them like water moving through obstacles, always finding the path, never stopping, never drawing attention to herself. It was working. Then Bull Garza set down his coffee cup and looked at her and said, "Hey, you got something on your apron." Maya looked down. There was nothing on her apron. She looked back up. Bull's smile had changed. It had gotten smaller and more specific. Around the table, his men were paying attention now, putting down forks, settling in. This was a thing that was beginning, and they all recognized it, and they were interested. "Don't see anything, sir." "I do." He tilted his head. "You better get down here and let me have a look." The table laughed. Maya looked at him for exactly one beat, one controlled, measured beat, and said, "Can I get you anything else?" "More coffee." "Yeah," Bull said. He looked at his boots. They were massive things, black leather, caked with the dried mud of several states. "You can clean my boots." The room didn't go quiet all at once. It went quiet in pieces, each piece falling away as the men around Bull registered what was happening and leaned forward or sat back with the specific attention of spectators at a sport. Someone at the counter, Maya clocked him peripherally, a younger Iron Serpent, maybe 22, with a phone already up, started filming. Bull was still smiling. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to be angry. Anger was a tool for people who needed leverage. Bull Garza was a man who had leverage everywhere. This was entertainment, nothing more. "Clean my boots, little BTCH, he said, enunciating it like an instruction at a training seminar. His men laughed again, louder, and the word BTCH rippled through the room like a stone across water, expanding outward, touching every surface. From the kitchen came the sound of Dave Walsh appearing in the pass-through window, drawn by some shift in the air pressure of his diner that even he, untrained, could feel. He took one look at the scene and started to come around. "Dave." Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't look away from Bull. But Dave heard her, and he stopped. She was buying him a second. Making a decision. 71 hours and 47 minutes. She thought about the warrants. She thought about the prosecution. She thought about the 2019 cold case murder, about the trafficking pipeline, about the documents Webb had described as enough to put Garza away until he is a medical event, not a man. She thought about what 3 months of Millie's diner and encrypted phones and performing invisibility meant if it fell apart now. Today, 11 yards from the culmination, because Bobby Garza wanted an audience. She thought about all of that in approximately 1.3 seconds. Then she set her coffee pot on the counter. She picked up a clean dish rag from the stack near the register. And she walked to Bull Garza's table, and she knelt down in front of Bobby Bull Garza's boots, and she began to clean them. The room exploded with laughter. The phone recording. The slaps on backs. Someone said something in Spanish she didn't bother translating. Someone else said, "Yeah, get all up in there, little lady." Bull himself laughed, a big rolling sound from deep in his chest, genuine, delighted, the sound of a man who has just confirmed something he suspected about the world. Maya worked in silence. Inside her mind, which was a separate and very different place from the diner on Route 12 in Harlow, Montana, things were considerably quieter and considerably colder. She was in a deployment that couldn't be named in any unclassified document, in a city she would not name even to herself, in a structure that was dark except for one room. She had been there for 16 hours, in a position that the human body does not enjoy, and she had not moved, and she was not going to move, because the right person had not yet walked past the right window. This was the job. This was what the job required. A Delta Force officer understood one thing above all else. Your feelings about a situation are not relevant to the correct execution of that situation. You are not your feelings. You are the mission. She cleaned Bull Garza's boots. She could feel the specific quality of Tina's silence from the kitchen pass through. Not the silence of someone following her lead, but the silence of someone trying very hard not to cry. She could feel Dave Walsh's helpless fury from across the room, and she willed him again, wordlessly, to stay still. She could feel Bud Carlisle filming from his corner booth, and she let him film. All of it was evidence. All of it was going into Webb's package. Every single thing that happened in this diner today was going to be Exhibit A, B, and C in the federal trial of Bobby Garza. She was not cleaning his boots. She was building a case. Good girl, Bull said, watching her. 71 hours. 43 minutes. When she was done, she stood. She folded the rag. She looked at Bull Garza with an expression that was professional and blank and courteous, and she said, "Can I get you anything else?" Bull blinked. She could see him process her composure. It surprised him slightly, and she watched the surprise move through him and then flatten into something closer to annoyance. He'd expected tears or defiance, or the satisfying crumple of dignity. He'd gotten a woman who looked, somehow, exactly the same as she had before. It didn't compute. "More coffee," he said finally. "Of course," said Maya Chan, and she went to get the pot. 40 minutes passed. The Iron Serpents ate and drank and used the bathroom in shifts and played music from someone's phone and generally proceeded to make Millie's diner feel, for a stretch of mid-November afternoon, like the common room of a particular kind of institution. Maya served them. Dave Walsh stayed in his kitchen, doing what she needed him to do, which was nothing. Tina served the few remaining civilian customers. The elderly couple had not left, which Maya filed as a detail that made her feel something she didn't have time for, with a carefully assembled smile. Bull Garza ordered a second brisket sandwich and ate it with deliberate enjoyment, watching Maya work. There was something in his attention that had shifted from entertainment to study. She could feel it without looking at him. In her experience, this shift in a certain type of dangerous man was rarely a good sign. It meant he was thinking about the next thing. She was at the counter refilling sugar caddies when she heard Tina's voice from the far end of the diner. No, I'm fine, I don't need." Maya turned. Deke Garza had Tina by the wrist. Not hard, demonstrably, performatively light. His fingers wrapped around the girl's wrist as she tried to pull back, and he was smiling the way his uncle smiled, with all the warmth of a pressure system that intended to become a storm. "Just sit down for a minute," he was saying. "Keep me company. Nothing wrong with that." "She's working," Maya said. Her voice carried across the diner without effort. She wasn't loud. Loud people shout to compensate for a lack of authority. Maya simply spoke from a place where authority was not under negotiation, and the room heard the difference. Deke looked up. His smile went from amused to sharp. "Nobody asked you, sweetheart." "Let go of her wrist," Maya said. At his booth, Bull Garza set down his sandwich slowly and turned to observe. Who the hell? Deke started. Let go of her wrist. 3 words. Same tone. Same cadence. The kind of repetition that isn't escalation because it was never at anything less than certainty from the beginning. Deke released Tina's wrist, not because Maya had compelled him, but because the moment had a charge he hadn't expected and he wanted to recalibrate. Tina moved immediately, retreating toward the kitchen door, and Maya stepped forward with the same easy economy of motion she used for everything, interposing herself between Tina and Deke Garza with no particular drama, like a door swinging shut. She heard Dave Walsh in the kitchen. She heard him start to come out. Dave? Kitchen. Now. She didn't look back. He stopped. Bull Garza had risen from his booth. He walked toward her slowly, hands loose at his sides, wearing the expression of a man exercising patience not because it cost him anything, but because he found it interesting to see how things would develop. He was very large up close. He stopped in front of her, and the room fell silent again. You've got nerve, he said. There was no anger in it. More like appreciation. She's 18, Maya said. Yeah. Bull tilted his head. And you're what, 27? 28? What exactly do you think is going to happen here, little girl? Maya looked at him for a moment. Then she leaned forward slightly, and she spoke very quietly. 3 sentences, delivered in a voice pitched precisely for Bull Garza's ears and no one else's. She watched his face change. It was not a dramatic change. Bobby Garza was too experienced, too controlled for that. But there was something, a microcontraction around the eyes, a fractional stiffening of the jaw, that told Maya the information had landed exactly where she'd aimed it. What she'd said was the kind of thing that only 2 categories of people could know. The people who'd done it, and the people whose job it was to know exactly what you'd done. Bull stared at her. Who are you? He said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. Underneath was something older and harder. A waitress, Maya said. Bull studied her for 5 seconds. Long, careful, the study of a man who trusted his instincts and was currently listening to them scream. Then he reached out and grabbed the front of her apron and pulled her closer, and the smile came back, but it was a different smile now, a working smile, the kind a man uses when he's decided that whatever he's looking at, the correct move is to break it. Let me ask you something, he started. The back door banged open. 20 men came in from the parking lot. Iron serpents who had been waiting outside, eating from their saddlebags, playing cards on the tailgate of a trailer. They filled in behind the 26 already inside. The diner was now holding 46 iron serpents, and the space was thick with them, and the calculation of the room had changed entirely. Bull felt the shift. She could see it in his posture, the recalculation, the return of ease, the physics of 46 to 1 landing in his favor. He released her apron and stepped back. He spread his hands in an expression of mock hospitality. He looked around at his men and then back at her. Now what, little b******? Maya looked at him for a moment. She glanced at the windows, at the clock above the register, at the door to the kitchen, where she could hear Tina quietly crying and Dave Walsh not making a sound, because she had told him not to, and even terrified, the man respected her. She thought about Marcus Webb's message. Do not surface. Close. She looked back at Bobby Garza. She thought, I know. She thought, I'm sorry, Webb. She thought, 71 hours and 42 minutes. Then she thought nothing at all, because the front door of Millie's diner opened and the question of what she was going to do became, in an instant, irrelevant. 6 people walked through the door. They were dressed like civilians, jeans, jackets, boots. There were no weapons visible. There was nothing on their persons that would have told an ordinary observer anything other than, these are people walking into a diner. They fanned out from the entrance with the natural ease of people looking for seats, and if you weren't watching carefully, you might have missed the geometry of it. How 1 went left, 2 went right. 1 stayed at the door, 1 went toward the counter, and the tall one in the center walked straight into the room, without stopping. But Millie's diner was not full of ordinary observers. 46 members of a criminal motorcycle club had spent their lives reading rooms, reading the temperature of spaces, the distribution of threats, the body language of everyone in their vicinity. They read these 6 people, and the room went quiet in the way that only happens when people who are themselves dangerous recognize something they have not seen before and do not have a word for. The tall man stopped in the middle of the diner. He was maybe 34, dark-haired, with a jaw like something architectural and eyes that moved through the room in one controlled sweep, cataloging and filing, and then stopped on Maya-chan. He held her gaze for 1 second. His expression did not change. It didn't need to. Behind him, Maya could see Carla Reyes, 33, compact, with the deceptive softness of someone who could dismantle a weapons system or a person with equal precision. And 4 other faces she knew the way she knew her own hands, from 10,000 hours of proximity in conditions that civilian language did not have good words for. Jake Morrison looked at her and said, "Major, we're here." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the diner. Bull Garza, to his credit, recovered faster than most people would have. "Who the hell are you?" he said. His voice was even. Only someone who knew what to listen for would have caught the flattening at the back of it. "Morrison," Jake said. "Jake Morrison." He let the name sit there. "The woman you've been talking to for the last 2 hours is Major Maya Chun, U.S. Army, Delta Force, retired, effective 14 months ago." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, every eye in the room tracking the movement, and produced a credentials wallet. DOJ Special Operations Consultancy. She's been the case officer for Operation Iron Veil since September 3rd. He looked around the room, at 46 Iron Serpents who were collectively doing a very rapid reassessment of the last 2 hours. The operation is complete. Federal warrants for 41 individuals currently present in this diner were signed and authorized at 0700 this morning. There are 12 DOJ vehicles on Route 12 and 4 on the county road. You're surrounded by approximately 60 federal agents. He paused. Nobody does anything stupid. The room was absolutely silent. Bobby Garza looked at Jake Morrison. Then he looked at Maya Chan, still standing in the center of his 46 men, still wearing her blue and white apron, still with the coffee pot on the counter behind her. "You're lying," Bull said. Jake said nothing. "She's a waitress," Bull said. From somewhere deep in Millie's diner, behind the kitchen pass-through, Dave Walsh made a small sound that might have been a laugh, and might have been something else entirely. Tina had stopped crying. Maya reached up and unclipped the small pin from her apron. A blue enamel pin in the shape of a flower that Tina had given her in October, because Tina gave small gifts to people she liked without any particular agenda. She held the pin in her palm for a moment, looking at it. Then she set it carefully on the counter. She looked at Bobby Garza. "I enlisted at 17, she said. Her voice was the same as it had been all day, even, unhurried, carrying without effort. "I was commissioned at 21. I had my first deployment at 22. I was attached to Delta Force at 24. I have 12 classified deployments across 4 continents. The call sign I was given in my second deployment was Ghost, because they said I came and went and left no trace. I have been in this diner since September, and I have been building a case against you since the day I arrived." She tilted her head very slightly. "You have a brisket sandwich in front of you that you have been eating for the last 40 minutes, and every conversation you have had in this diner today has been recorded. Your nephew Deke made a comment at 12:17 that is going to be Exhibit 37 in your federal prosecution." Deke Garza, across the room, went a specific shade of white. "Bobby," Maya said, "I know about El Paso. I know about the cargo that moved through Billings in October. I know about Mikhail." She watched his face on that last one. Watched the micro-response she'd been waiting 3 months to see confirmed in person. "I know about all of it. And it's all in a file that Marcus Webb submitted to federal court at 7 this morning." Bull Garza stared at her. "The woman," he said, very quietly, "who cleaned my boots." "Yes," said Maya. There was a pause. And then something strange happened. Something Maya had not planned for and could not have predicted. Bobby Garza laughed. Not the big performative laugh from earlier. Something smaller. Something that sounded, almost, like a man who had been beaten so completely and so cleanly that the only appropriate response was a certain dark appreciation. "Ghost," he said. "That's what they called you." "That's what they called me." He reached very slowly toward his hip, and Maya moved. She was across the distance before Bull's hand reached his weapon. The technique she used was not dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. A short, efficient sequence of movements that used Bull's own size and momentum against him with the precision of physics rather than force. His arm went behind his back at an angle it was not designed to sustain. His face met the linoleum floor of Millie's diner with a sound that was, she noted, considerably less satisfying than the situation warranted. His knee was under her, and she was on top of him, and the Glock 19 was across the room before he understood it had left his holster. "Don't," she said to the room. And the room didn't. Because in the 3 seconds it had taken Maya to put Bobby Garza on the floor, Jake Morrison's team had moved. It wasn't a fight, it was an environment change. 6 people repositioned 46 armed men, not through superior numbers, but through the particular confidence of people who had been in worse situations than this, and had not found them particularly problematic. 3 weapons were on the floor. 5 men found themselves braced against walls or counters with a quiet firmness that suggested resistance was a poorly considered option. Carla Reyes had her hand on Deke Garza's shoulder in a grip that looked gentle and was, structurally speaking, incapacitating. The remaining 40 men looked at each other, and then at the 6 people who had come through the door, and at the woman currently kneeling on their president, and made a collective calculation that was, Maya noted, entirely correct. Nobody moved. Outside on Route 12, the first DOJ vehicles were pulling into the lot. Maya could hear them, the particular sound of federal law enforcement arriving in coordinated numbers, doors opening and closing, the crackle of radios. Through the front window, she could see blue and white lights beginning to pulse in the gray Montana afternoon. She eased her knee off Bull's back and stepped back. She did not help him up. He rose slowly. With the labored dignity of a large man managing pain he wasn't going to acknowledge, and turned to face her. There was blood on his lower lip where the floor had met it. His expression was difficult to categorize. It was the face of a man processing a comprehensive rearrangement of his understanding of the world. He looked at her for a long time. 71 hours, he said. You said 71 hours. 71 hours and 42 minutes, Maya said. That was how long I had left when you walked through that door. 3 months of work. A federal case that would have closed without a single variable. Without anyone having to be here. Without any of this. She gestured, minimally, at the room. I was going to walk out of this diner Thursday morning, and that would have been it. You never would have known who I was. Bull absorbed this. Why are you telling me, he said. Because, Maya said, you asked me to clean your boots in front of 46 people, and you deserve to understand exactly what that cost you. Bull looked at her. Then he did something that she had not expected and would think about for a long time afterward. He nodded. One slow nod, as if to say, fair enough. As if the loss of a 3-month case timeline was a price he recognized as legitimate. Hell of a thing, he said. Yes, Maya agreed. The front door opened. Marcus Webb came in first, in his gray DOJ jacket, with 6 agents behind him. He looked at Maya. He looked at Bobby Garza, standing with blood on his lip. He looked at the room. Then he looked back at Maya with an expression that contained, in roughly equal parts, profound relief and the specific exhaustion of a man who has spent 3 months managing an asset who has just done the thing he asked her not to do. Major Chun, he said. I know, she said. We're going to have a very long conversation. I know that too. He sighed. He nodded at his agents. And Bobby Bull Garza, president of the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club, drug trafficker, arms dealer, person of interest in a 2019 homicide investigation, and a man who had this afternoon filmed himself requiring a waitress to clean his boots on her knees, was placed in federal custody with a tidiness that would later be described in the DOJ's case documentation as textbook. The remaining 45 men were processed in the parking lot over the next 40 minutes, in the gray November cold of Montana, under a sky that was, as Maya had predicted, beginning to think about snow. She stood at the diner counter throughout. She did not move until the last Iron Serpents member was in a vehicle, and then she sat down on a bar stool and accepted, without comment, the cup of coffee that Dave Walsh appeared from nowhere to set in front of her. The federal agents worked the diner for 2 hours. They were professional and thorough and mostly quiet, and Maya answered their questions with the same economy she brought to everything, and signed what needed signing, and confirmed what needed confirming. Webb sat across from her at one of the booths for 45 minutes and said, eventually, You're going to tell me why you surfaced when you were 71 hours out. Garza was going to assault an 18-year-old girl, Maya said. Webb looked at the table. The op is complete, Maya said. The warrant's held. Morrison's team covered the gap. Everything you need is in evidence. She looked at him. I protected a civilian who was in immediate danger. That's not a debriefing issue, Marcus. That's a consequence of the job existing in the real world. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then, the evidence from today, Garza's behavior, the on-camera harassment, the assault on the waitress. Tina Walsh. On Tina Walsh. All of that is admissible and is going to make an already strong prosecution even more airtight. He rubbed his face. You know what's infuriating about you, Chun? I'm sure you'll tell me. Even when you go off script, you somehow make the script better. Maya drank her coffee. I'm aware. Webb left at 3:30 p.m., and after that the diner was quiet in the way that only happens in the aftermath of large events. Not peaceful exactly, but emptied out, the walls holding the echo of what they'd witnessed. Dave Walsh came out of the kitchen. He was a large man, not in the way Bull Garza was large, not as a weapon, not as a statement, but with the solidity of someone who had spent 30 years feeding people and found meaning in it. He stood in the middle of his own diner and looked at Maya Chun, who was still sitting at the counter, and he didn't say anything for a long time. The first morning you came in, he said finally, you told me the coffee was good. It is good, Maya said. You didn't. You never gave me any hint. No. I'm sorry. He considered this for a long time, in the way that honest people consider things that have upset the map of what they thought was true. Then he nodded. Well, he said, you eat free. For the rest of your life, you eat here for free. Dave, that's not negotiable, young lady. She looked at him for a moment, and something moved briefly through her face that was not the careful blankness she'd worn for 3 months, but something unguarded and real, and then it passed. Okay, she said. The kitchen door opened, and Tina came out. She had stopped crying, but the evidence of it was still on her face, the redness around her eyes, the unsteady quality to her mouth. She walked directly to Maya and put both arms around her from behind, pressing her face between Maya's shoulder blades, and held on. Maya went still. She was not, in her experience, a person who was easily held. Physical contact in non-operational contexts was something she had always managed at arm's length, in the same way she managed most things that required vulnerability. But Tina Walsh held on with the uncomplicated need of someone who had been frightened and was not yet done being frightened, and after a moment Maya placed her hand over Tina's where they crossed her collarbone. You came back for me, Tina said, her voice muffled. You stepped in front of him. Yes, Maya said. Why? You could have, Tina's voice cracked. Your operation. You could have just. No, Maya said. I couldn't. Tina held on a little longer. Then she straightened up and wiped her face with her apron, and her smile, gap-toothed, uncomplicated, came back through the wreckage of the afternoon, and Maya thought again of gardens beside old buildings, and said nothing. Jake Morrison was waiting by the door when she finally stood to leave. The other 5 had gone. Carla with a wink and a 2-finger salute that Maya did not return but accepted, the rest with nods that carried the weight of things that didn't need to be spoken. Jake had stayed. She'd known he would. They'd circled each other at a distance all afternoon, speaking only in the professional context of the debrief, and she'd watched him not watch her with the particular precision of a man performing the exact opposite of what he was doing. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his jacket pockets, and when she approached he straightened without urgency. You look the same, he said. You look older, she said. He smiled, just briefly, just enough. I've had a hard 18 months. So I hear. A pause. Outside, the last federal vehicle was pulling away. The sky had gone the particular silver that precedes snow in Montana. Not dark, just diffused, the light going soft, and even in all directions. The team's being reconstituted, Jake said. He said it carefully, without pressure, in the tone of someone presenting information rather than making a request. New TOE broader operational mandate. Webb's group is getting a dedicated special operations component. He paused. Hayes asked about you. How is Rock? Old. Irritating. Completely correct about everything, which makes him insufferable. Another brief smile. He said to tell you he still thinks you're the best operator he ever ran. Maya looked at the snow that was beginning to fall outside the diner windows. The first flakes, catching the parking lot light, going horizontal in the wind. She'd been right about Wednesday. Jake, she said. Yeah. How long have you known I was here? He looked at her steadily. About 6 weeks. And you waited. You had an operation. You waited, she said again, for me. He didn't answer, which was an answer. She picked up her coat from the hook by the door, a practical navy blue thing, worn at the elbows, and put it on. She thought about the encrypted phone in the locker. She thought about Webb's offer, which he'd made at the end of the debrief, quietly, with the specificity of someone who had prepared it carefully. She thought about the 12 classified deployments, and the call sign, and what it meant to be so good at something that the world around you never stopped needing you to be it. She thought about Tina Walsh at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, restocking sugar caddies alone. She buttoned her coat. "Tell Hayes I'll call him Thursday," she said. Jake was very still. "That's not a no. That's not a no." He held the door open. She walked through it into the first snow of November. Behind her, through the diner window, she could see Dave Walsh already moving tables back into their rightful places, and Tina refilling the napkin dispensers, and the yellow light of Millie's diner doing what it had always done, holding steady against the dark and the cold of the Montana evening, warm enough to see from the road. She stood in the parking lot for a moment, in the snow, and let herself feel the shape of the day. Then she buttoned the top button of her coat and walked toward the parking lot, and the only sound was her footsteps on the gravel and the wind coming down off the Rockies, and the world was very quiet and very clean and full of the particular kind of promise that comes after things end. 3 months, 71 hours and 42 minutes. One choice. She'd make it again. The federal prosecution of Bobby Bull Garza and the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club commenced 8 weeks later in U.S. District Court, Montana. 41 individuals were indicted. Garza received concurrent sentences totaling 67 years. The case was described in DOJ's year-end report as the most complete domestic trafficking and organized crime prosecution in the Western District's history. The video of Bobby Garza ordering a waitress to clean his boots, filmed by an Iron Serpents prospect who was himself subsequently charged with 6 federal counts, accumulated, inexplicably, 27 million views on social media before the court issued a preservation order. Garza's attorney argued the video was prejudicial. The court disagreed. The waitress was not available for comment. She had already left Montana.